Hello, here I am. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm it's the boring and I gotta check it every time because yeah, here we go. Welcome. We are going to read we're not gonna read Frankenstein, it would take too long. We're gonna talk about Frankenstein. You're gonna decide who you think the monster is. I was gonna do this ambiance thing with these candles. Now these are battery operated candles from Costco. Pretty awesome. Uh so whoa, hey, sorry. Whoa. All right. Just gotta make sure I'm public. Okay. So I'm gonna do my intro and then I'm gonna come back. What? So I hope you guys have fun. And I'm wearing a sweatshirt. It's very exciting. I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Not okay. Somewhere in here is my intro.
Boom! Let's do this.
Well, hello. I hope it's all well again. Welcome to Kendra Katy. I don't know. Things are weird lately. I don't know if people are losing interest, if I'm just not that interesting or whatever, but I just want to do fun stuff and this is fun for me. So I really am excited about this one tonight because I'm going to I'm just going to tell it. I already love where this is going. Yay! That says Jay Little and Nisi says, I love the intro. Yay! That's so exciting. So this is going to be really fun because now I'll just give you a funny little thing. When I used to teach English at Maryville, I had to teach the Odyssey and stuff, and these kids were like, oh, and I do all these accents, and they were like, have I told you this? I probably have. Will you teach this in your New Jersey accent? And I would be like, all right, okay. So I did like all day, and I was like, all right. So there's these guys floating around on a boat, and they see this island, and they're like, here's these flowers. It's the lotus flowers, and they're like, oh my god, they look so nice, and they're so pretty, and then they made me feel sleepy, and they're watching this. This is like making a noise, so hopefully this is not good. They see this giant like across the way, and he's like eating sheeps and stuff. So I thought about telling this story that way, but I think I'm just going to tell it, and then you tell me because I grew up. Now, tell me those of you who are watching. So, because with this one with Streamyard, I can't tell who's watching unless you make a comment, and I can pull it up there. So, and it's 64 degrees out. So, being true to my Phoenician status, and I'm wearing pajamas, I got to wear a sweatshirt because it's so chilly outside. So let me know if you guys can hear me okay, because for some reason I'm hearing like a clinking in here. I don't know if it's just these things, but okay, so you ready? We're gonna tell the story about Frankenstein because I have a really cool book of it. It's like leather. And it's not exactly the same as you might remember as a kid. And I have some movie clips from Kenneth Branagh's version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Okay. And it's really actually cool because it's a pretty good depiction, but they always add extra stuff in there. So Nisi said it's the nuts and it's the nuts and bolts in my head for sure. And Shaylin, I don't know what that means. You tell me. I can't even read it. Okay, got Frau Blucher. Okay, you're gonna have to put it in the English thing, but this should be fun. So the story that you grow up with that you think is Frankenstein's this monster, okay? And Frankenstein is actually Dr. Frankenstein. Monster was unnamed. He never got a name. So he's actually Frankenstein's monster, okay? And I believe it was called the Prometheus Man when Mary Shelley wrote it. So here's the cool thing, and I think I forgot to put the actual dates on there. Oh, here's my little ticker. Hi, Frankenstein's monster. Is he aptly described? Is he a monster? So the following information I got from this website right here. Mary Shelley married her husband at 18 after his wife committed suicide, and they spent most of their time fleeing abroad, fleeing creditors. So now I kind of want to look up who the heck Mary Shelley was and why she was fleeing creditors. Okay. Oh, it's Frankenstein. Exactly. Everybody knows that movie, right? Young Frankenstein. It's Young Frankenstein, and he's like, it's Frankenstein. Okay, so Mary Shelley married him. It was a rainy afternoon. in 1816 in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay. And Mary Shelley, her husband, poet Percy Shelley, their friend Lord Byron, and Lord Byron's physician, John Polidori, were all staying in his place together. And it was a stormy night and it was lightning. And of course, there was no electricity back then. So they were just like, oh, what's going on? Like, what are we going to do? And they're all telling stories and whatnot. And they decided to create a contest out of this. And they were like, all right, let's all retire to, or, whatever, go to our rooms, because they all wrote by candlelight, I'm sure, anyway. I mean, they probably had kerosene lamps. So a storm's not going to do anything to that. So Jay says Frankenstein's monster is his name. Well, I guess it's a description more like to me, but okay. Okay, so they go off to their own rooms, and I don't know if Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley went to separate rooms, probably. But they were having a contest on who could write the scariest story, and Mary Shelley won with the story. And then she also wrote another story that's similar to The Last Man on Earth, I think. I forgot to look it up, but it's super interesting, the stuff she was thinking of back then. Okay, and so the interesting part is also that this I got this information from here. Polidori, the physician, his vampire. So he wrote this book called The Vampire, Vampyre. It's the vampire is called Lord Ruthven, and it's inspired by a thinly disguised portrait of the predatory English poet Lord Byron in Lady Caroline Lamb's novel Glenvarron or Glenarvon. Okay, so Frankenstein was published in 1818, and The Vampire or Vampire was published in 2019. So two incredible stories came out of this evening where there was a storm going on and they didn't know what else to do. Okay, so here we are, Frankenstein, the story. So I'm just going to tell it to you in my own words. Okay, I took a couple of notes. I wrote a couple of stuff down, so I don't want to forget it. So the story starts out with this guy named Walton, and he's this explorer, and he's up in this cold area. And since the story starts in Switzerland, I'm assuming it's up there in the tundra somewhere or whatever, but there's water and stuff, and he's just floating around in this boat with these guys, and I don't know what the hell they're exploring in the ice. But they're there and they've been there like 6 years. So he's writing to his sister. And by the way, how are these letters getting to his sister from this boat? Okay, so like these are the things I want to know. Like when people are someone's thrown in a pit in a book, I'm like, where do they go to the bathroom? Like these are the things I want to know. Okay, so it doesn't start until letter 4, boom, in this book, where he's basically writing his sister, and he's like, okay, well, here we are. There's a bunch of ice. We're sitting on the boat. There's not much going on. Kind of boring, but I'm still okay. And then day 4, he's like, so strange an accident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it. Although it is very probable that you will see me before these papers can come to your possession. So that's the other thing, right? So basically, he's telling a story about this guy who just comes out of the middle of nowhere with like a dog sled thing, but it's just him with all this equipment and stuff. And he just shows up at the boat. And then they're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I forgot where I put it, but he's like, I'm coming to kill the man I created. Something he says. Anyway, he's in search for this guy, he says. And the Walton and the crew are like, well, we must have seen this guy if he's traveling the same way you are. And Victor Frankenstein is like, well, I think so. I think he is. But nobody's seen it yet, okay? So then the story skips to Victor Frankenstein's story, okay? So it starts out there in Geneva, Switzerland, and it's all happy-go-lucky, and it's like, it's amazing, life is good, mostly, okay? So how Victor came to be in existence is that his mother's father died, okay? And then the man who was her father's best friend became her protector and then married her. And then they in turn had Victor. So that's how Victor was born, okay? And then Elizabeth, who he ended up marrying, is actually his cousin, because it's his dad, who was the father's best friend, is his sister's daughter is Elizabeth. So that's his cousin. And her mom dies, so she comes to live with the family too, okay? So they just grow up being best buds, and they're just having a grand old time, and they're just, the hills are alive, they're just doing all the things. And then Victor wants to go off to medical school in Ingolstadt, Germany. And before he leaves, the mom gets really sick with scarlet fever. Yay! She gets really sick with scarlet fever and she ends up dying. But before she dies, she talks to Elizabeth and she's begging Elizabeth, please marry Victor. You and Victor have to get married. So I don't, back in the day they did that thing. I don't know why. Edgar Allan Poe married his cousin too, or his niece or something. Okay, so that's just the thing. But they didn't. Victor was like, whatever, I'm going off to med school. Okay, so he leaves and he was fascinated by science, just fascinated by all the animation and dead things and whatever and what could you do. And so he becomes this kind of reclusive weirdo and he's in his apartment or flat or whatever it is and he's just collecting all these body parts, and he's doing all these experiments and stuff and he's just trying to figure it out and oh, lightning and whatever and all the things. And so maybe this story with the lightning came from the night because the lightning was going and bright lights and all the things. So he ends up succeeding, okay, and he creates Frankenstein, or the monster, okay. And so I have taken some video clips from Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which actually, like I said, is really good. It's a pretty good depiction. It adds a little sensationalism, just as they all do. But here it is. Here's how dramatic he is at the beginning, and it's only like 10 seconds. So you ready for this? You guys could hear that, right? So it's like super dramatic, and I think Kenneth Branagh must have been like in his heyday because he's walking around without a shirt on, thinking he looks really good. He's like, oh, I've got this silky robe on. He's like, not Howard Hughes. What's his name? Hugh Hefner before Hugh Hefner was around. Okay, so he creates this monster, and the monster is so grotesque it freaks him out, and he's like, oh my god, and he just leaves. He just leaves the flat. Like, it doesn't do anything with the monster. It doesn't do anything. Here's this weird looking guy with a bunch of stitches on and whatnot, probably acting like a crazy person. And he's just like, and he leaves. So then I don't know how much later it is. He comes back and he's relieved to find that the monster isn't there. Okay. So he's just like, oh, I'm going to go on with my dailies. Okay. So he does. And in the meantime, when he comes back, he doesn't know where the monster is. Elizabeth writes him this letter, okay? So there's a girl that lived with them. Her name's Justine, and she was a friend of the family. And Justine's mom had died. And so she went to live with the family. She was like taking care of William, who was Victor's little brother. He was a small child at this time, okay? And William ends up murdered. Like, he didn't just die, he was murdered. And they found a picture on Elizabeth's person that was seen on with William last. Okay, so everybody's like, wait a minute, this is like a special picture. William has it. He's like, oh my god, I love this so much. It never leaves me. And suddenly he ends up dead, and this picture is on Elizabeth's body, like in a pocket or something. And she tries to deny it. She's like, oh my god, there's no way I would have killed him. And it's this big thing. And then she decides, well, I'm just going to admit that I killed him because maybe I'll have some salvation of some sort. And they're like, nope. And then just execute her right there. So now Victor has all this like turmoil going on, and he's lost his friend and he's lost his brother. His mom has died. So he starts thinking about Elizabeth, and he's like, what am I going to do? And so he goes to the top of this mountain, okay, to think. And as he's at the top of this mountain, I mean, he is in Switzerland, right? He sees this figure in the distance, and it's like grotesque and whatever. He knows it's the monster. So he's like, he goes crazy, and he tries to attack this monster, and the monster's not having it. This monster's like pretty, I mean, he's muscly. Okay, he's got some strength, and Victor does not. And so Victor gets frustrated. He's like, screw you, I'm leaving, basically. And the monster suddenly speaks with eloquence and says, oh, excuse me, but I would like you to accompany me to this cave so I could tell you this story. And Victor's like, oh, okay. So he goes, and the monster, this is where the monster transforms and he becomes more humanistic, okay? And so he tells him the story. And so he's sensitive and he's emotional and he understands his role in the world in a weird way. Okay. And Victor calls him a demon. All right. Well, then who is Victor? Because he's the one that created him. So the monster shows him his educated human side, like I said. And they're sitting by this fire, and the monster is like, given all of this shit that you've put me through, I want a companion. I want a female companion. And Victor's like, oh, wait, I shouldn't have gotten there yet. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gotten there yet. He explains to him that well, whatever, that's fine. The fire makes him warm, but it also burns him. So he's like, he's gaining all this knowledge, and he's like, um, I want a woman. And Victor's like, no, that's no way. Okay. So the monster's telling him, I'm so confused by why I was created. Okay. So he says, he came across a hut back in the day, like however long ago, and this old man was so scared of him he ran away. And then he went to this village where all the people were afraid of him and were mean, and they ran away. And so then he decides to stay away from humans. And this is like the sad part because, well, it's getting there. Okay. So he finds another cottage and he realizes that he can peek through these little hole, like the little slivers in the wood and stuff, and he can see what the people are doing. So he learns to speak through observation, and he starts to understand the connectedness of family and the loneliness of his solitude. Okay. And so he realizes how truly alone he is. And this is where, in my head, I describe it as he's a man without a soul that just wants a soul, you know? And so time passes and he can speak and he can understand perfectly, and he becomes more and more distraught. Okay. And he's running around this cottage one night and he finds this satchel with some books in it. And one is Paradise Lost, and he relates to that character. And he has Victor's journal because he had taken it the night that he left. Okay. So he starts reading Victor's journal, and he begins to understand the horrific circumstances of his own creation. And so the family leaves one day and he decides to enter to speak to the old man. Okay. So here's another clip. And here, this is now these are not the best quality in order to not have copyright infringement or whatever. I film them with my camera and then I put them on iMovie. Fancy.
I'm glad you finally came in. A man shouldn't have to hide in the shadows.
Better that way for me.
Why?
People are afraid. Except you.
And so obviously the guy's blind. He feels his face and he's like, well, that's pretty unfortunate, you know? And then the monster just describes how ugly he is and stuff. And then this is what's sad. Okay, so they chase him away. So they come home, the family comes home and they chase him out and they're like, get out of here. And so at the end of this, when I was younger, when this movie came out, I cried because I was like, I could feel this. And I've explained this before because I'm an empath. It's not because I know it's a movie and it's character and it's a fake story, but just to think about like the stuff that he's going through. So here's that part where they chase him out and then how he feels afterwards.
Get out of here! Get out of here! Oh, no! Get monster! Leave it alone! It's all right. We have to leave here.
It's so sad. So, I mean, obviously people would be afraid of him, not knowing, you know. So in the book, he runs away and there's a girl drowning and he saves her. He basically saves this girl and this man sees him and he thinks that he's trying to hurt her. So he shoots him and then the monster runs away and then he comes across William, lo and behold. And then he finds out that William is Victor's brother. And so he murders him and places that picture that I was talking about from William onto her person and like in a pocket or whatever. Okay. And this is when he asks for a female companion because he's like, look at all this shit that I've been through. Get me a companion. If you do, you know, because Victor's like, no, that's crazy. I'm like horrified by what I've done. And he says, but I'd be less, I'm not going to kill. I'm not going to be apt to kill. And So Victor's like, ugh, and he keeps putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And this is when he decides to marry Elizabeth. Okay. Sorry, I was a little bit mixed up there. And so he's trying to create this woman for the monster. And he starts having visions of this monster and this woman having devil babies and, a race of devils. And so he destroys his work in process. And this really pisses the monster off. Okay. And the monster vows to get revenge on Victor's wedding night. And so after this happens, things move along, and Victor is accused of killing this guy because they found this dead body on the beach, and then somebody had seen a boat that resembled Victor's. Now, who could that have been? I mean, your speculations, right? So they said they just had to show the body to Victor and see what he would do and see how he'd react, and he freaked out because he saw the marks from the monster on its neck, the dark marks, and he knew that the monster had killed him. So he starts having convulsions and stuff, and he passes out, and he gets really sick for like 2 months. And then while he's sick, he wakes up in jail, and he's like, "Well, this sucks." And his dad comes to see him in the jail, and they just chat and whatnot. And then he goes to court and he's released because there's not enough evidence, yada yada. Okay, and then after this is when Victor and Elizabeth get married, and I've got a little clip of that. I mean, like,
Don't worry, sir. You're well guarded. Now, why don't you go on upstairs to your wife? It's not often a man has his wedding night.
all right, you guys could hear that, right? Because my camera was on mute. So la da da, he's gonna have his big wedding night. So the reason why he's got all those people out there and he's walking the grounds and stuff is because he remembers the monster's vow. And in the book, same thing happens. He's walking the grounds, and then, okay, he's walking around and he hears this scream, and then he goes inside and he realizes that the monster wasn't coming for him, it was coming for Elizabeth, and he killed Elizabeth. Okay. And so he's totally distraught and he goes home to tell his dad. But this is where movies and where the Bride of Frankenstein and, like, Young Frankenstein, whatever, and all those kind of take away from it, because the monster had asked for a wife. He didn't actually create one in the book, but in the movie here's now, this was Helen Bonham Carter, right? Is that her name? Helen, what? Okay. Anyway, you'll see. This is the wedding night. They're having some sexy time. Victor hears a noise. He leaves, and then you'll see what happens. Whoops. Oh yeah, no, you're right. Sorry, my bad. Oh, I messed up. She ends up dying, and I missed that clip. So Frankenstein comes and kills her, and then this is the part where he recreates her right away in the movie. And so I'm thinking, like, she's dead. Why did he have to sew other parts on her? Because she just died. Like, couldn't he just recreate her? And so here it is, and this is kind of funny, and it shows you how Elizabeth right away, because she has been dead, that, like, she's got, like, kind of like thoughts too, like the monster does.
Get away from her, she's mine!
She's mine! She said my name! She remembers!
She's mine!
Pretty hideous, right? This might be the clip. Let me show it to you real quick. Hang on.
I saw him in a flash of lightning. He vanished toward the lake. You can stay here. We lost him.
All right, so that's pretty true to the story. Sorry, if I'm not perfect, it's better, right? Perfection is just so boring. So yeah, so what happens is same in the book, they're together, he's walking the grounds, hears a scream. The monster has killed Elizabeth. In the story, he does not recreate a person. Okay. So after this happens in the book, Victor decides to go home and tell his dad what's happened. So so the dad's lost his wife, right? He's lost Justine and William now, and now he's lost Elizabeth. Okay. So Victor goes home and the dad's just like, WTF, and then he dies a few days later. Okay. And so Victor looks like he's a little bit cuckoo, and he tries to tell the authorities that this monster killed Elizabeth. And they're like, yeah, sure, monster. All right, keep telling me that story, bud. They don't believe him. Okay. And so he resolves to destroy the monster. And then this is where Walton, the explorer guy, takes over the story and is explaining this. And that he says he didn't know the guy before he arrived there, and that Victor had arrived, that, like I said at the beginning, on this, sleigh thing, and he's telling him this story. So now imagine, in the 1800s, alone hearing the story, but like now hearing it, but hearing it then, like what? Like she was way, way, way ahead of her time, right? So he's writing to his sister and he's saying, I don't know this guy, but this is the story. This is like really far fetched. I'm not really sure if I'm buying this business. And then the crew like convinces him. And if you look on the clips on YouTube or the old movie, I think it's the Hodor guy from Game of Thrones. So they were like, let's get out of here, GTFO, let's go. And so finally the Walton's like, all right, fine, we'll leave. But it's a few days later after Victor had died, and he hears this horrible moan coming from the cabin where Victor was. And so he walks in there and then he sees this guy. Okay. And I have that clip, but I don't know if I actually got it uploaded because some things were not coming through. So I guess I don't have it. But anyway, he basically tells him that he's telling him all he suffered, just like he told Victor. And then he says he regrets being the instrument of evil. And that now that Victor is dead, he's ready to die. In the movie, it's kind of cool because he says something about what's your name, and he says he never gave me a name. So he says he's ready to die, and he leaves and departs into the darkness. And the very end of the book, and this is not a spoiler alert, okay? It's been around since the 1800s, you guys. Okay, so don't get mad at me. He sprung from the cabin window as he said this upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in the darkness and the distance. So you tell me, was the monster really a monster, or was Frankenstein a monster? Do you think Frankenstein had regrets? Dr. Frankenstein? I mean, pretty awesome story if you think about it. So it's not the monster thing that you know from your childhood. Very intelligent, very interesting story. Creepy, nonetheless, still, but there you go. So that's my story. Halloween's coming up. I think next week is Summer Pearson. And we don't know what she's doing yet, but I believe we're going to do it next Wednesday. So I'll keep you updated on that. So thanks for joining me tonight, you guys. Have a wonderful night. Love you. And I will see you next week. I hope you enjoyed our story time. What?